It was the sort of afternoon that doesn't decide what it wants to be. The sky above the city's upper decks had the color of unpolished chrome, and the wind smelled faintly of ozone, like a storm rehearsing lines offstage. I was halfway through folding heat-dried linens, their edges warm against my wrists, when the door chime gave a polite pulse across the apartment. It made me flinch. Nobody drops by on level 40 without messaging first. Surprise has been bred out of us by elevator cues and calendar apps. Through the translucent panel of the entry door, a shape waited, a tall outline blurred by the privacy film. For a second, I imagined a courier drone had taken pity on itself and learned to knock. When the panel slid away, it wasn't a stranger. It was someone I used to know like the back of a book. "Afternoon, Mira," he said. And the past returned with a voice I hadn't heard since the era when our city still printed paper bus schedules. "Oren," I answered, and the name sounded newer than it should have. My husband was away on a long week of client dinners and chartered red-eyes, and the apartment was too quiet in that way that makes you walk softer. I stepped aside and let Oren in. He looked like someone who had spent the last few years collecting weather. The lines at his eyes were gentle but permanent, the kind you only get from laughing and squinting against bright, indifferent skies. His hair, once ink dark, had given up a small surrender at the temples. There was a stillness to him, not the hush of emptiness, but the quiet of someone who had learned the patience of waiting rooms and long train windows. He wore a plain canvas jacket and a faint smile, like a visitor who didn't want to wake the furniture. "I was nearby," he said, and impulse won. "Impulse will find trouble on level 40, I told him, because jokes are how we ask whether a person is here to stay. He glanced around as if the air itself kept old photographs. The narrow plant wall along the balcony doors, the ceramic cup of loose screws I never throw away, the lamp with its paper shade that turns white light amber, it all made some kind of map for him. I put water on to boil and set 2 cups on the counter, the same 2 we used to use when people still showed up without algorithms telling them to. We spoke first about things that wouldn't bruise. The elevator that had stalled last month on the 12th floor. The bakery 2 blocks down that learned how to make actual rye with flavor. The aquatic festival they'd revived by the lower docks. Then the conversation put its hands in its pockets and kicked idly at stones. It didn't want to step anywhere dangerous, but it knew there were cliffs nearby. His eyes kept finding mine in that way that checks a door to see if it's unlocked. It wasn't romance like the theater posters. It was something quieter. The recognition of someone who has carried a similar ache and learned to set it gently on the table between them. I said I'd been busy, and then I said I'd been hollow, and both were true. My husband Dane has a schedule that could run a factory. He's kind. He's dependable. He thinks about numbers and risk the way other people think about birdsong. Lately, we'd moved through the apartment like neighbors in a hallway. Polite, efficient, an email away from intimacy. Oren wrapped his fingers around the steaming cup and listened like listening was the thing he had come here to do. "You don't have to be made of stone to keep a house standing," he said. "Soft things hold weight too." I laughed because the alternative was to cry and my face felt too tired for the full fall of it. He didn't reach for my hand. He set his palm against the wood, near, that's all, close enough that warmth could travel without the politics of touch. The kettle hummed, the city hummed, some water lines far below us hissed like a distant radio. For a while we didn't try to be clever. The room was small and the afternoon larger than both of us. When he left, he told me, "Tell Dane I said hello." And then, almost as an afterthought, "Take care of yourself like you mean it." The door closed, and the apartment filled with the sort of silence that has questions inside it. I stood there and let the quiet ask what it needed to. I tried to answer, but there are languages you forget without practicing, and naming your loneliness is one of them. That night, the rain finally started like an apology that was late but honest. It rattled against the balcony glass and coaxed the air into that rich, metallic smell that makes everything feel temporary and new. I lay awake and let the sound write on the ceiling. Every few minutes, my thinking returned to Oren's face the way a compass finds north after being shaken. Morning did what it always does. It arrived brightly without asking permission. The rain had washed everything clean enough to make the city look young. The laundry was folded. The mug in the sink had a ring of tea I'd ignore until afternoon. The comm buzzed at 9 and Dane's picture splashed into the corner of the screen. The tie askew, the eyes too awake for how little he must have slept. The effective charm that makes boardrooms want to lean his way. He narrated his travel like a weather report through static, time zones stacked on one another like plates. "I'll be back Saturday, probably late," he said at the end, and I gave him all the appropriate words and one more for luck. Afterward, I set out to do the small rituals. Toast, coffee windows, but they tasted like habit more than breakfast. I took the mug to the balcony and watched the city. A man on a maintenance scaffold wiped rain off a solar skin with the precision of a surgeon. Somewhere deep below, a bus sang its brakes. A flock of hobby drones traced a faint choreography across the hazy sky like someone twirling ideas. At noon, my comm blinked with a number I didn't have to read to recognize. "Hope I didn't intrude yesterday. It was good to see you again, Mira." The name beneath it said Oren. My reply took longer than it needed to. I wrote and deleted and shaped words into neatness, then let them go. "It was good to see you too. You didn't intrude." The next message came almost before the breath I took after sending. "I'll be at the North Promenade tomorrow near the Arboretum Pond. If you want to walk, I'll bring the good coffee." There was nothing scandalous in those words. People walk. They drink coffee. I stared long enough for the mug to go cold. "Sure," I typed. "I could use a walk. The North Promenade is where the city pretends to be a park. 100 stories up, it hangs a ring of green around a throat of steel. The Arboretum Pond is a flat oval that reflects whatever the sky is in the mood for. That day it reflected a gray that hinted at better intentions. Oren was already there on the bench near the cypress, a paper cup cradled in both hands and a second cup waiting like an offered truce. He stood when he saw me and smiled in that easy way that makes strangers put their guard down without noticing they'd had one. "You've learned to find good coffee in a city that burns it," I said, taking the cup. It was mercifully strong and tasted like weathered wood. "I taught a barista to let the water be water and the beans be beans," he said. Diplomacy pays. We walked without wanting to arrive anywhere. The path circled the pond and then veered into the glass house where vines mapped the ceiling like veins. We stayed on the outer edges of bruised subjects. Oren spoke about work that involved ferrying ideas between people who didn't trust each other yet. I told him about the clinic on level 9 where I schedule shifts, how nerves telegraph their panic in the twitch of a lip, how grief can be measured in the angle a person keeps their shoulders. He told me about the space between what people say and what they mean, and how you can learn to read it without resenting it. He didn't say divorce, but the word walked along with us and didn't need to be introduced to anyone. Sometimes our eyes met and didn't hurry away. It wasn't a stare. It was that pause before a page turns when you know that this sentence, the one you just finished, is the hinge everything swings on. Beyond the glass house, the city opened in a bright spill of buildings and bridges. The pond kept reflecting. Somewhere a child laughed that completely unembarrassed laugh I forget adults were born capable of. When we reached the corner where the path drops a few steps and then becomes nothing but view, he stopped and looked out at it all. "You deserve to be found in your own life," he said. Almost like he was reminding himself, and I was meant to overhear. I wish I could say I corrected him with confidence, that I told him I had never been lost, but truth requires a humility I hadn't practiced. The words landed with the weight of something I'd been carrying. We finished the walk, and he walked me to the tram like a person who knows how to leave the moment intact. That night, sleep barely visited. My mind replayed the exact pace of his voice, the way he didn't require me to protect him from my honesty. In the days that followed, time moved with that dreamlike logic it sometimes adopts. Dane returned, his suitcase sliding soft wheels over the hall mat, his kiss landing on my forehead like a familiar punctuation mark. He asked if the faucet was still misbehaving, and then answered his own question by opening his laptop between us on the couch. It's difficult to describe the way two good people can construct a quiet between them that is both intentional and accidental. We didn't break anything. We simply didn't tune the instrument. Even silence has a pitch, and ours was flat. Oren's voice kept running under everything like a bass line you only notice when you take it away. "You deserve to be found." I told myself I wasn't going looking for him. I told myself I was going nowhere that could surprise me. It's a dangerous thing to tell yourself anything at all in a city with a lake for a heart. On the third day, I followed my steps to the lower decks where the air has a sweeter temperature and the light arrives from odd angles. I ended up near the lake without pretending it was an accident. The water had that deceptive calm that happens when a huge body decides to be gracious. Sunlight ran its fingers through the surface until it turned into a school of coins. I spotted him halfway across the boardwalk instinctively. the way we know the shapes that used to live in our house. He saw me and smiled with a surprise that contained no shock, like someone turning a corner and finding the exact street they were hoping for. "I think this city is smaller than the maps say," he said. "Or we're just walking the same circles," I answered. And we laughed without apology for what might be hidden inside the joke. We sat on a bench with peeling green paint and let small pieces of afternoon step around us. A boy tried to teach his younger sister to skip stones. 2 teenagers took turns making ugly faces in a camera and then laughing at how beautiful the other looked anyway. A street musician tuned a guitar and then forgot to play it because the tuning sounded enough like music. "I've been thinking about what you said," I told him finally. "The way a person pulls a splinter, they've become too tired to pretend they don't feel. About being found. Somewhere in the ordinary, I misplaced the person who used to pay attention to small miracles. Happens to people who love responsibly," he said, and there was no sarcasm in it, only a kind of wonder. "We hold up what needs holding until our arms become the thing that needs holding." I looked at him long enough to see how the years had carved him into someone steady and kind without sanding away his curiosity. He had lines now, good ones, cartography of days spent making eye contact with the world. His eyes still carried that thoughtful horizon, the way trees know where the sun is even without looking at it. "You ever wish you'd done it differently?" I asked, eyes on the water. "Sometimes," he said. "But then I wonder which person I would have been different for. Maybe I would have missed someone important. Maybe I would have missed myself." He put his hand on mine in that deliberate way that doesn't ask so much as offer. It wasn't a claim. It was simply warmth placed where it could be useful. I didn't move at first. In that slowed-down minute, I thought about Dane. About nights we fell asleep mid-sentence. About the way he calms himself by arranging spreadsheets like they are mosaics. About how he says my name when he really means it. The lake breathed once, the water shivering as if something very large and kind had turned over in its sleep. I slipped my hand free. Oren nodded without injury in the gesture, like he'd given me a map and was content to let me choose my street. "I should go," I said. I promised myself I would stop promising myself things and then breaking my promise. "Mira," he said, and my name in his voice sounded like a room with the windows open. "You don't have to apologize for wanting your life to wake up." That night I sat on the balcony until the city was a necklace of amber lights and the sky a patient bruise. Dane's voice wandered through the apartment from his office like a familiar radio show, gentle, persuasive, a little too far away. And it struck me, simply and without drama, that Oren's return wasn't a storm come to wash me out of my own home. He was a lighthouse on a coastline I had forgotten to look at. He was a flare that said, "There is still a you here. Go find her. Bring her back with you, the week unscrolled." I didn't avoid Oren, not exactly. But I also didn't leave doors open where I shouldn't. I let the message threads between us thin until they felt like what they were, a kindness exchanged between 2 people who knew better than to misname the moment. Meanwhile, I paid attention to my house like it was a language I wanted to learn again. I cooked without treating it like a task. I changed the bulb over the hallway mirror and found my face in true light. When Dane came home one evening, rumpled and carrying his usual polite debris of work, I watched him the way you watch someone across the street in a city you used to live in. It's possible to love a person and still forget how to see them. At dinner, he glanced up between inboxes and spreadsheets and asked, "You okay? You've been different. Quieter." The old version of me would have said I was fine and then stacked the plates until the conversation had no room to sit down. The new version, or maybe the older one I'd misplaced, took a breath and told the truth I had, in small ways, been practicing on strangers whose names I read from clipboard stickers. "I think we've been sharing walls more than a life," I said. He set his fork down carefully. Not like a surrender, but like a man putting a delicate instrument in its case. "You mean us?" "I mean us," I said. "When was the last time we had a conversation that kept going after the dishes were done?" He leaned back like the idea had weight and he wanted to see it from another angle. I didn't notice how far the floor had shifted. "It's not a floor exactly," I said. "It's more like we built a bridge and then stopped crossing it." We were quiet in a way that didn't feel like hiding. The quiet was thinking. He rubbed his thumb over the curve of the spoon the way he does when he needs a small sound to mark time. "How do we start walking again?" he asked. "We could begin with small things," I said. "Tell me something you love that has nothing to do with work." "I'll tell you one too. He smiled like a person who has just remembered how to open a jar. I love the way the city smells right after the storm when the wires are still singing. I love strangers who wave at boats, I said. And we both laughed at how specific that was and how true. The next day, I went to the lake to say what needed saying to the ghost of a possibility before it turned stubborn and refused to leave. The light had put on a softer shirt, and the water mirrored it with the calm of something that has nothing to prove. Oren was there, not because we had planned it, but because the city kept moving us like chess pieces toward and away from the same squares. I wanted to see you, I said, and he nodded in that patient way that suggests the sentence can end wherever it needs to. I talked to Dane, I went on. We're both trying to remember how to hear each other when we're speaking quietly. That's the bravest kind of conversation, he said. All whisper and no applause. He and we lost the habit of being curious about each other, I said. I don't want to lose a good thing because I forgot to water it. Oren looked out at the lake like it was a whiteboard with the answer already written. He's lucky, he said, and it came out like a toast you say with a glass of water. I used to think love meant sameness. That if it changed shape, it was breaking, I said. But maybe it just means paying attention while it transforms. Just don't put your own pulse on silent, he said. Whatever shape it takes, let it include you. Wind sketched new script onto the water. A gull wrote its name and then erased it. I told him I was grateful he had knocked on my door on an indecisive afternoon. He told me gratitude was the only currency he still trusted. We said goodbye without ceremony because theater would have stolen the honesty right out of it. No promises, no lingering touch. We stood like two people at a station platform who know the trains are going in different directions and honor the fact that both directions exist. When I walked away, I didn't look back because the movies teach you to, and sometimes a life is healthier when it forgets what the movies taught it. The city looked cleaner on the ride home. Not newer, just scrubbed of something I had been projecting onto it. The buildings had earned their edges back. A line of laundry 2 balconies down hung like flags of a gentle country. I cooked that night with the windows open and the stove fan loud. And when Dane came in, he leaned against the doorframe and watched like he was remembering something he'd misplaced behind a stack of memos. I thought about what you asked, he said. What I love. I forgot to answer properly. You can answer now, I told him, keeping the pan moving because garlic burns as soon as you look away. I love the word almost, he said. I love how it's honest about proximity. It doesn't claim arrival. It lets you be proud of the road you've already walked and humble about the steps still due. That's a very Dane word to love, I said, smiling where he could see it. And you? He asked. I love when buskers tune their instruments, I answered. The way the note keeps sliding around until it finds its home. We ate without screens. After, we sat on the balcony with a blanket across our legs, like an elderly habit we had decided to try on early. The city dropped the day like a heavy coat and turned its inner lights on. Dane reached for my hand the way you reach for something you had assumed was out of reach, and when our fingers fit, the click was audible to no one but us. We didn't fix anything in that moment, because things weren't broken so much as they were unpracticed. But the attention we gave each other was a kind of medicine I'd forgotten works without any side effects worth mentioning. The days after that weren't a montage of perfect behaviors. We forgot to listen twice for every once we listened well. He slipped back into a week where the office called him more times than was humane, and I had an evening I spent talking to the skylight because it was easier than saying a difficult sentence out loud.